Malaysia, Professor Dr. Andrew F. Marsh, Professor, University of Massachusetts, USA, His Excellency Mr. AWANI, Ambassador of the State of Palestine in KL, His Excellency Mr. Ardashir Said Ja'far Qadiri, Ambassador of the Republic of Tajikistan in KL, Al-Hajj Murad Ibrahim, Chief Minister, Bangsamoro Transition Authority, BTA, Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, Philippines, Mr. Nur Izzah Anwar, Chairperson, Social and Economic Research Initiative, SERI, Dr. Yusra Anuji, former international spokesperson and Nahda Party of Tunisia, Dr. Ahmed Galun, member of Executive Bureau and Nahda Party of Tunisia, Professor Dr. Saadia Muhammad, Board Member, IAIS Malaysia, Honorable Embassy Official, distinguished academician, respected politician, esteemed government official, valued student, esteemed organizing committee, ladies and gentlemen. All praise to Allah and a warm welcome to all of you to our event today, book launch on Muslim democracy, essays and dialogue by Rashid Ghanushi with Andrew F. Marsh. To start off today's event, it is with great honor that I invite Professor Dr. Magli Malik, Chairman of the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, IAIS Malaysia, to deliver his welcoming speech. Please welcome, Prof.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Datuk Sri Syed Hamid Alba, Professor Dr. Andrew Marsh, His Excellency Ardashir Said Ja'far Qadiri, Ambassador of the Republic of Tajikistan, Mrs. Nur Izzah Anwar, Al-Hajj Murad Ibrahim, Chief Minister of Bangsamoro Transitional Authority and Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, Philippines. For those who are not familiar with Bangsamoro, it was formerly known as Mindanao, and Hajj Murad is the Chief Minister of this autonomous region in the Philippines. Dr. Yusra Ghanushi, former international spokesperson for Nahda Party, and Dr. Ahmad Galud, member of the Executive Bureau and Nahda Party, and former Minister of Youth and Sports of Tunisia, honorable embassy officials, distinguished academicians, esteemed organizing committees, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And a very good morning to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of IAIS Malaysia, give me an immense pleasure to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you gathered today. It is truly heartening to see many familiar faces among IAIS Malaysia's friends, and for those who are joining us for the very first time, allow me to offer a brief introduction to IAIS Malaysia. The International Institute of Advanced Studies Malaysia, unlike what it was known in the past or previously throughout the years, with the new mandate given by the current Prime Minister, Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim, now it serves as a think tank for Malaysian government in matters concerning global Muslim affairs and international relations involving the Muslim community. Today marks a significant occasion as we come together to celebrate the launch of a book on Muslim democracy, essays and dialogues by Rashid Ghanushi with Professor Andrew Marsh. And the subject matter at hand holds profound significance for the Muslim Ummah, which is the core focus of our institute. It is rather unfortunate and saddened that even at this moment, at this age, the discourse surrounding Islam and democracy has often been the subject of polemics, fraught with misunderstandings and misconceptions. And this book that we're going to launch today promises to shed a new light on this complex relationship. Therefore, we are fortunate today to have in our midst one of the authors of this enlightening work, Professor Andrew F. Marsh, traveled all the way from the US to be with us today. Prof. Maj is a distinguished authority in the field of Islam and democracy, and I trust that his insight will enrich our discussions here today. Earlier this morning, I was with some of the Sri Lankan delegates, and they were showing me a video of Professor Maj speaking in Sinhalese. I was surprised. Actually, they said it was not his voice, it was dublaja. It was VO of the Sri Lankan presenters who translated. Prof. Maj talk about Islam and about Muslims. Additionally, I'm delighted to announce that in conjunction with this book launch, we will be hosting a podcast featuring Professor Maj discussing this very topic. So, I strongly encourage all of you to stay tuned to our social media channels, website for updates on the podcast and the podcast release. However, it is with a heavy heart, and I must acknowledge the absence of the central figure of this book, our beloved Sheikh Dr. Rashid Ghanouchi. His absence is not by choice, but due to the circumstances that I'm sure many of you are aware of. It is incumbent upon me to express our solidarity with Sheikh Ghanouchi and condemn strongly his unjust and undemocratic arrest by the government of Tunisia, which has persisted for over a year now. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to share a personal anecdote about my connection with Sheikh Rashid. I first encountered his ideas immensely through Dr. Azam Tamimi's book, Rashid Ghanouchi, Democrat Within Islam. It was the year 2000. Subsequently, I had the privilege of visiting him frequently during my brief 4-year sojourn in the UK. And I also interviewed him for my PhD thesis. Since then, I've drawn immense benefit from his profound insights and teachings. I also have had the honor of incorporating his ideas into my academic works, including my thesis that was published by Ruling Publication, which I believe strongly that I indebted a lot to Sheikh Rashid. I also incorporated a lot of his ideas in numerous articles and book chapters, whether they are in English, Bahasa, or in Arabic. The impact of Sheikh Rashid's ideas extends far beyond Tunisia. In Malaysia, his influence extends far and wide, encompassing various segments of society, from Islamic movements like ABI, Ikram, WADA, to Muslim political parties such as PAS and AWANI, and even multicultural and multi-religious parties like PKR and DAP. I've dedicated a journal article that was published internationally about Sheikh Rashid's influence to these Islamic movements and parties and political parties in Malaysia. My final article before I joined politics is about a comparison between Sheikh Rashid's idea and our beloved Prime Minister's idea that I authored jointly with my former student. Now she is a lecturer in International Islamic University, Professor Shazza. I've explained this in many of my writings, including an article published by IAIS long before I joined the Institute. The significance of Sheikh Rashid's teaching on democracy, justice, moderation, and good governance are more relevant now than ever, given the current political landscape marked by the long-standing problem of corruption, as well as the rise of extremism and polarization. His steadfastness in the face of adversity serves as a testament to his commitment to practicing what he preaches and what he writes. Therefore, every word penned in this book carries profound weight and significance that transcends mere scholarly discourse. And during the Madani government, under the administration of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, most of Sheikh Rashid's ideas would benefit a lot to the current administration of this country. And I trust it would enhance the discourse of Madani and what the government intends to achieve to serve for the best interests of the nation and the people. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, let us come together in solidarity and pray for the release of our beloved Sheikh Rashid Ghannouchi, along with all other political prisoners in Tunisia. Allahumma inna nas'aluka an tufrija wa tutlika as-sarah kulla mu'taqalin mazlumin. Amin ya rabbal alamin. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Andrew for his tireless efforts in promoting not only Sheikh Rashid's ideas, but also Islam and Muslims in the global world. I would also like to express my appreciation to Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Datuk Sri Hamid Anwar for graciously agreeing to officiate the launch of this important book, and also to Saudari Nurul Izzah, who I trust knows Sheikh Rashid more than myself and many of us in this hall. May our discussion today be fruitful, and may we all benefit from the exchange of ideas and perspective. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Madil Malik, for the welcoming speech. And now, let us hear from none other than the author of this book himself. Therefore, we are honored to invite Professor Dr. Andrew Marsh from University of Massachusetts, USA, to give his opening remarks. Please welcome him.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for coming here today. Thank you to the IAIS for organizing, for your warm hospitality, for all of your kindness. This is my first time in Malaysia, and I'm immediately in love. Such a beautiful country, such beautiful, kind people. It's been such a wonderful experience, and I'm grateful to everybody for your kind hospitality and warm welcome. I'd like to begin by extending a tribute to Sheikh Rashid Ghannouchi, who is now in prison for over a year. I believe it's about a year and almost a month and 2 weeks. He is suffering from an unjust imprisonment from a dictator who had no political program other than shutting down democracy and politics itself. And from what I understand, from Sheikh Rashid's family and from his attorneys, he is bearing this unjust imprisonment with patience, with a lack of resentment, with a lack of hatred, and with nothing other than a faith in the ultimate victory of democracy itself. So I'd like to take a moment to extend my greetings and my respect and my gratitude to Sheikh Rashid, and my profound sadness that a lifetime of work for freedom and democracy for Tunisia has been met with this kind of injustice. I don't want to speak too long. I'd like to say a few things about the origin of the book, a few things about how I understand the significance of the ideas and the making of the book, and then look forward to conversations throughout the morning. So I come to this topic as a political philosopher, not as a politician, not necessarily even as a student of everyday politics, but as a scholar of ideas. And I've been familiar with the thought of Sheikh Rashid for over 20 years, from the time that I began studying for my PhD, studying political philosophy, studying Islamic political thought. He was always well known as the premier thinker in the realm of democracy. But it took me a while to fully appreciate the depth of the actual philosophical ideas that are expressed in his greatest book, which is Public Freedoms in the Islamic State, or and putting it in Al-Islamiyya. I began studying this book in depth actually after the Tunisian Revolution of 2011, thinking that I might find some ideas in there about modern Islamic legal theory or constitutionalism. And what I encountered actually surprised me. It was a book that dealt with the most fundamental aspects of political philosophy that are studied in any tradition. What is the human? What is human well-being? What are human capacities? What are human capabilities? How do human beings thrive as individuals and in a collective? What is the source of authoritarianism? What are the causes of tyranny and dictatorship? What is the grounding and foundation of democracy? But also, what is the solution to the threat of tyranny? And you have this great text, which is grappling not only with the Islamic tradition from the pre-modern period, not only with the modern Islamist tradition of the 20th century, but is in conversation with political thinkers from multiple traditions, with Montesquieu, with James Madison, with other thinkers about law, legality, and ultimately what is the source of the prevention of tyranny and authoritarianism. So reading this book was a transformative experience for me. It immediately transformed my research and led to my second book, The Caliphate of Man, Popular Sovereignty and Modern Islamic Thought, which I'm very happy to announce has been translated into Malaysian by Dr. Mahmoud Tuman, who I believe is here someplace. So I'm very pleased that that could be available to a Malay audience. And so I began a many year study of Sheikh Rashid's ideas, and gradually I came to know him and his wonderful family. We arranged for the translation of this book into English, and over a number of visits to Tunisia, we hatched the idea of translating more of his essays and articles that had not yet been translated into English, but then also engaging in a philosophical dialogue between him and myself. As a student of political philosophy, we don't only read texts, even by those thinkers that we admire, only to admire them, but we read them to ask questions, to struggle, to find gaps and interesting problems to pursue. So for me, it was one of the great, if not the great privileges of my academic life to spend many days with Sheikh Rashid discussing his ideas, discussing the evolution of his ideas in great detail, discussing ongoing evolution of the problems of democracy in a transition. So that's sort of the origin of the book. I want to say a few things about Tunisian democracy, about the problem of transition, and about Sheikh Rashid as a political philosopher and as a political actor. For me, the Tunisian democratic transition is such a fascinating and inspiring, but also in the end heartbreaking case, because unlike many transitions, perhaps in Egypt, perhaps in other countries, there was nobody orchestrating the transition from dictatorship to democracy other than Tunisian political actors. There was no great military like in Tunisia, like in Egypt, that was sitting outside and making sure things didn't go too far. There was no occupying power. There was no United Nations transition team. It was only the Tunisian political parties themselves. So it was like building a ship while you're already in the ocean. And for me, this was a very great example because there was no recourse to arguments, to motivation, to rationales for democracy other than the interests of Tunisian political actors themselves in creating a better system. And I believe that this fundamentally shaped and transformed Sheikh Rashid's thinking about democracy from his earlier work to the work that we're trying to put forward today on Muslim democracy. If I can make it simple, there are at least two ways of thinking about politics and democracy. One is you begin from abstract ideas. You say, what is the best form of rule? What are the values that are most important to political life? And then what kind of politics, what kind of law, what kind The other way is to begin in real life, to say, what are the things that make people's lives bad? Dictatorship, lack of freedom, imprisonment, corruption. What are the kinds of things that make people's lives good? A lack of conflict, being able to breathe freely, not having fear of the government, being able to express your way of life and your religious beliefs. All of these things don't necessarily flow from abstract ideas. They flow from immediately understanding what is political life about. And so what impressed me so much in the depth of Sheikh Rashid's democratic commitment is that if I understand his writings and his practice correctly, democracy became the most important dividing line between friends and enemies. You could have been part of the old regime. You could be a secularist. You could be a communist. But if you were committed to democracy, and if you were committed to recognizing everybody else's equal right to participate in politics, then there was no rationale for you being excluded or repressed or having your same freedoms violated. And so there was this understanding that democracy itself is the only alternative to two great evils: authoritarianism on the one hand and civil war on the other. So when you read the essays in this volume, and I hope everybody has a chance to, and when you study our dialogues, I think you really get this sense that democracy in Sheikh Rashid's thinking is not just something that comes after. It's not Islam and democracy, the way you might say Islam and economic development or human rights. Democracy really comes first. In fact, one of the essays in this book that I'm most excited about is called Freedom First, Hurriya Awani. And the idea is all of our other values, Sharia, religious virtue, all of these things are subsequent to establishing political freedom. Everything in Islam only has value if it's expressed freely. Everything in somebody's daily life relies on the experience of freedom from dictatorship. And so there's this depth of commitment without necessarily needing abstract theology in the principles of freedom and the principles of democracy. And so other actors, whatever their other beliefs, whatever their other commitments, the question is always, are we involved in a shared commitment to recognizing each other as equal and legitimate members of a society, members of politics, and then we can discuss our differences after that. And that, for me, not only as a fan of democracy, not only as somebody that loves Tunisia and wants to see it thrive, but as a political theorist, was a quite profound learning experience for me, and I think is a profound lesson about where democratic commitments come from and how to think about the relationship between religion and democracy and other kinds of values. So one of the things that I hope comes out of this book on the part of people that are intellectually interested in this problem is what are different theories of Islam and democracy. On my reading, the book Public Freedoms in the Islamic State has one vision of democracy, and some of the essays and conversations in on-Muslim democracy express a slightly different theory. And this is a room full of intellectuals, people that are passionately committed to studying democracy, to studying modernity, to studying law and politics. And I hope that that's a conversation that comes out of these readings. I want to close by saying something about the experience of producing this book. When we produced this book, Sheikh Rashid was the head of a political party that was constantly engaged in maintaining Tunisian democracy through crisis after crisis. There was a historic coalition between the Ennahda party and the party that represented the old secular elite that was largely the sort of work of two figures that recognized the superiority And yet, for over a week, in fact, a number of different periods over a few years, he put all of this aside to spend hours upon hours a day talking about his own intellectual tradition, his origins in the small village that he came from, his own education in Tunisia, Damascus, France, his grappling with different kinds of thinkers in the Islamic tradition and in other non-Islamic traditions. He patiently put up with question after question by me. There are certain things that I, as a political philosopher, was very interested in, that I think he grew very tired of, but I asked them repeatedly. And it was an extraordinary experience, and I was really able to get a sense of a certain character that is characterized by virtues that are not often appreciated. Patience, the ability to think before you speak and before you act, and the absolute lack of any hatred of even those that imprisoned you and tortured your friends, and the absolute lack of any desire for revenge. And so, over this period of time, I learned a lot about a very, very rare combination of intellectual virtues, personal characteristics, and a lifelong effort to bring these kinds of things into one life project. And so, in my view, as a historian of political thought and as a political philosopher, I think that there are at least two different kinds of thinkers. There are thinkers that we read simply as intellectual figures. They publish great books that we argue about. But then there are other kinds of political thinkers who were not only political philosophers, but also were engaged in day-to-day politics. People like Edmund Burke, other figures like this. And we read their thought precisely because of the way in which they're thinking about politics reflected a certain kind of personal character, but also a sense of responsibility. Ideas do not just live on their own. Ideas are responsible for actual events in politics, and we are also responsible for the way in which our ideas reflect real political life. So in my view, over a long period of time, I believe that Rashid Khanouchi will be remembered as one of those rare philosopher practitioners, philosopher politicians, who is deeply committed to ideas, the life of the mind, but also recognize that political thought is political. It is about the lives of actual people and a practice of taking responsibility for actions and thought that bear on the lives of others. And that's why I'm so extremely proud to be a part of this book. I'm thrilled that there is interest in these ideas all the way in Malaysia, and I'm very, very excited to hear how you encounter these ideas and what questions and thoughts you have in response to them. Thank you very much for your attention. Sorry for going a little bit long. And thank you again for your hospitality.
Thank you, Professor, very much for a very enlightening opening speech. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to warmly welcome Yang Berbahagia Tan Dato' Sri Dr. Syed Hamid Jaafar Albar, former Malaysian Foreign Affairs Minister and AGM member of IAIS Malaysia, to deliver his keynote and officiating speech. Please welcome him.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Saya hormati saudara pengacara majlis, Profesor Dr. Mazli Malik, Chairman of IAIS Malaysia, His Excellency Ibrahim, Chief Minister, LANGSUNG Transition Authority, BTA, LANGSUNG Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, Philippines, OPRMM, and Chairman of the Moro Islamic Federation of France, my Alex. I read his introduction in great detail because when I was a foreign minister, I had to deal a lot with it. And it's not an easy path, but ultimately, alhamdulillah, this is one of the, our understanding. The key word here in this particular case is patience, and ultimately they get what they wanted after a long struggle. Congratulations. Sorry to take time on that. And then Professor Dr. Andrew Mark of the University of Massachusetts, USA, Excellency, I do not know whether the Ambassador of Palestine is here, is it? I don't think so. His Excellency Mr. Bashir Said Jafar Budri, Ambassador of the Republic of Tajikistan in Kuala Lumpur, Mrs. Nurul Iza Anwar, Chairperson, Social and Economic Research Initiative, SERI. I think our honorable guest, Dr. Yusra Wanamushi, former international spokesperson of the Ennahda Party of Tunisia. It is easier for me to read the name of the party in Arabic than in anyway, another former Excellency Dr. Ahmad Galul, who is a member of the Executive Bureau of the Ennahda Party of Tunisia. Excellencies from the embassy, my friend Dr. Osman Bakar, Sir Iqbal, who are also with us. I'd like to acknowledge them. Esteemed government officials, valued students, esteemed organizing committee, ladies and gentlemen. This is how it was written for me. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me be frank. I think in terms of bilateral relations between Tunisia and Malaysia, as remote as a distance, I think to know a lot about Tunisia, not only as a foreign minister, because I have the opportunity, but when I was doing the Islamic political concept, and I was doing my master's on politics, I was doing a thesis on Ibn Khaldun. So I wanted to do a thesis on Islamic philosophy, but my professor told me, said if you take Islamic philosophy is so big. So you take from Ibn Khaldun, you are familiar. Just now I was quite happy to hear Dr. Andrew Mark trying to explain the difference between politics and philosophy. But if you look at Socrates, he says that this is what Rashid, our friend, our dear brother, Rashid is very important. If you want to look at politics from the Socratic point of view and democracy, it can only be successful if it is led by philosophers, people with knowledge. Otherwise, we will suffer the tyranny, according to him, the tyranny of the majority. So I think today, I am a less of a believer of democracy. I'm sorry to say, because I see democracy is the most abused word and the most abused practice, using politics in order to legitimize your action. So alhamdulillah, I do because when Mazli and his boys asked me to do the official launching, you know, I asked, I said, why have they asked me to do it? Because the original person, I thought it was quite appropriate, Sri Johari. He was supposed to do the launching of the book. He's a speaker of parliament. But then sometimes it is good not to have the current but to have the past. You know why I say that? Because the past, I've got more liberty to say things. If you are current, you have to be cautious and careful of what you are saying. I'm more familiar so far as the North African with Malik bin Nadi, because I love his writing, his theory, political philosophy, and he writes it beautifully. So now, because of what I have been told to do, they have even prepared for me a speech I haven't read yet. When I had to do a lot of research on Rashid, because I do not like to read genuinely. I like to know the person, but I am really actually fascinated by a person who holds the three important concepts in life. There is humanity, which he has a lot of, and then he has justice. Only if you understand and practice justice, then you can exercise patience. Without it, you can't. You will be very forgiving to your enemies. You will be forgiving to those who have done or oppressed you, and it is again. And law binds it all in order to make. That's why I say now, I am less confident of democracy, and I say it is a gift. I see with great sadness what is happening in the US, especially the students who fought for democracy, for human rights, for freedom, in order to give dignity to the human life. So ladies and gentlemen, now I will read the speech. Thank you, I think, Andrew, I think really there is no need for the launching, because he has given a very insightful account of the book. But I think to do my job, even though I'm not paid for it, ladies and gentlemen, actually it is with deep privilege and humility, and also an immense honor that I've been asked today to be a keynote speaker for this momentous book launch. It is important, and it is meticulously organized by the Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies. This institute, almost every week they have something to do, and I think it is most important thing is the dissemination of knowledge, creating understanding, creating the collaborative spirit, and trying to get the best of the human person. So I think I congratulate the IAIS Malaysia, and I think as mentioned by Dr. Magli just now, it has become an esteemed think tank dedicated to global Muslim affairs. I'm also very pleased, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to see the diverse crowd at today's event. Foreign dignitaries, youth leaders from across the globe, experts, activists, journalists, and members of the public dedicated to the affairs of the world. As we convene to commemorate the unveiling of this profound literary work, this is the first time I am launching a book without being given the opportunity to read the book. Because I myself am a writer. With a writer, I think if the worst that could happen is not being able to read and speak. So I think I consider it as a profound literary work. And authored by no less person than Rashid Banushi and Professor Andrew Mark. We are reminded of the intricate journey towards authentic democratic governance. This event not only signifies a discourse on profound insight encapsulated within the pages of this book, but also serve as a demonstration of our solidarity with Rashid Banushi himself. I think a lot of people go through this type of thing, and I think Rashid, we're sorry that he's inside. Sometimes the person that you collaborate is the person that do not keep the order of that collaboration. So that's very, very sad. When I went through the history and all sorts of things, how he very hard, he's a person who I find not interested in a post, in a position, but he's interested in sharing his thoughts and ideas in order to achieve what he thinks is good for Tunisia. I think this is fantastic. In Malaysia, I think we are going through the same process. We're trying to see that we bring in reform and changes that will guarantee the future of our people. Rashid Banushi, I consider as a revered luminary in both Tunisian politics and the Muslim world, and a stalwart advocate of political Islam and democratic principles. Unfortunately, as I mentioned just now, and everyone was mentioned, he currently finds himself amidst a situation that starkly contrasts the very ideal he has ardently championed throughout his illustrious career. I find I'm an idealistic person who believes in philosophy, thoughts, ideas, but it's difficult for an idealist to succeed in politics. You must be a pragmatist in order to succeed in politics. So I'm sure we will learn a lot from reading this book. Ladies and gentlemen, at 82, I am 80. This year, January, I become 80. Of age, Rashid Banushi 10. Now I am the chairman of the Damansara Mosque. I always say that I am the oldest chairman in the world. Now I find that Rashid, something that is more unique, more special, is the oldest prisoner of conscience in the Arab world. So it's something that we should really appreciate and honor. Is incarcerated due to his steadfast commitment to the cause of democracy and peaceful expression of belief rather than any proven criminal activities. At the moment, Rashid Banushi stands as the last legitimately appointed Speaker of the Tunisian Parliament through genuine democratic elections and before the Tunisian constitution was unilaterally altered. This makes me wonder how it can be done, but he has done. His unjust imprisonment stemming from the courageous speech denouncing the suspension of democratic institutions and the constitution of Tunisia served, in my view, as a poignant reminder of the precarious nature of democratic progress. It beckons us all to rise in solidarity and take decisive action in defense of freedom and justice. I think now freedom and justice need to be translated not in terms of words, but it has to be translated in terms of actions. And actions not in terms of physical, but action that will change and do the things that we think should be rightly done. The timeliness of this book cannot be overstated, particularly given the urgent need for a robust democratic vision in the Middle East. The ongoing crisis in Palestine and Gaza underscore the region's challenges, including foreign interference, military constraint, and entrenched autocracy. Sadly, the absence of genuine democratic governance in neighboring Arab states lends credence to Israel's deceptive claim it is a sole democracy in the Middle East. I don't think this is believed anymore. But we keep on, when people talk about democracy, even the US is not democratic now. Sorry, I think the Foreign Ministry may have to answer some. A shift towards democracy could profoundly impact the unfolding situation in Gaza, resonating with the Arab world's inherent empathy towards the Palestinian cause. Indeed, it could have potentially deterred Israel from committing atrocities on the scale we witness today. But I think you must always remember that Israel was born out of wedlock and continues to be out of wedlock. Beyond the Middle East, Anushi's groundbreaking work, in my view, holds significant relevance for the Muslim Ummah and the global community. As Professor Andrew Marsh has aptly noted just now, this book represents Anushi's latest intellectual contribution emerging in the aftermath of the Arab Spring and serving and signifying a notable progression from his previous writing. It encapsulates his refined perspective on what democracy is, shaped by the turbulent events that have reshaped the political landscape of the Arab world, and I think the global situation generally. Delving deep into the evolution of Islamic political thought, this book introduces the concept of Muslim democracy, a distinct model from Islamic democracy. It offers a very novel perspective on crucial inquiries like what should be defined Islamic state and society? How should we define Islamic state and society? And what objective should they pursue? Central to the notion of Muslim democracy is its departure from merely echoing the traditional Islamist stance on positive freedom advocated by thinkers like Abu Ala al-Baghdadi and Sayyid Qutb. Instead, it also emphasizes the necessity of negative freedom, granting individuals the autonomy to choose and act. And most importantly, this framework of Muslim democracy is rooted authentic Islamic sources, representing a vision that Muslims worldwide can embrace while remaining faithful to their beliefs. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, Rashid Manouchi's poignant experience, in my view, vividly highlights the relevance of the book's themes as we embark on the significant goals. Launch, let us do so with the seriousness it deserves. May our discussion extend beyond this gathering, resonating in influential circles and igniting a transformative change that is envisioned a future where the power of words and dialogue prevails over force and conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, with the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with utmost honor and pride, I now launch the book on Muslim democracy, Essays and Dialogue by Rashid Manouchi and Andrew Marsh. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
We humbly request for you to remain on stage to launch the book on Muslim democracy, Essays and Dialogue. For that, I would like to call upon Professor Dr. Madri Malik as well as Professor Dr. Andrew Marsh upon the stage to join Tansi. Please welcome.
Yusra, can you? Madame, s'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît. Alors, we want to complete.
Now, I would like to call upon Professor Dr. Mazli Malik to deliver some token of appreciation to Yang Berbahagia, Tan Sri Dr. Syed Hamid Akbar, as well as Professor Dr. Andrew Mas. Please.
Sudah banyak kurang. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So you give later. Okay. Otherwise you get twice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You may now return to your seat. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's continue with our book discussion forum on Muslim democracy. For that, I now invite the moderator of today's forum, Mr. Wan Naim Wan Mansur, Research Fellow, IAIS Malaysia, followed by fellow discussion. First, Mr. Nurul Izzah Anwar, Chairperson, Social and Economic Research Initiative, SERI. Second, Dr. Yusra Wanuji, former international spokesperson and Nahda Party of Tunisia. And last but not least, Dr. Ahmed Galung, member of Executive Bureau and Nahda Party of Tunisia. Please welcome. Mr. Naim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sayyidi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and salam sejahtera. Greetings and a very good morning to everyone. A warm welcome to the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, IAIS Malaysia. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the discussion session on the book on Muslim democracy, essays and dialogue by Sheikh Rashid Al-Ghanushi and Prof. Andrew Mas. My name is Wan Naim Wan Mansur, Research Fellow at IAIS Malaysia, and it is a great pleasure for me to serve as your moderator today. Ladies and gentlemen, Rashid Al-Ghanushi is undoubtedly a great luminary in the field of Islamic political thought. His work has been instrumental in shaping our understanding of the relationship between Islam and democracy. And one of the key tenets that he beautifully emphasized, which can be found in the book, is that where there is justice, God's law is enforced, rather than the other way around. So this perspective challenges the traditional notion that the mere application of Sharia law automatically leads to justice. So before we begin, please allow me to highlight several aspects or themes in the book that we might explore with our list of eminent speakers here. First is one of the key concepts of Muslim democracy that I find very interesting, as also explained by dear Professor Andrew March as well, is that it differentiates itself from classical Islamic stances, such as by thinkers like Sayyid Qutb and Abu al-Maududi, by not only focusing on the idea of positive freedoms, which focuses on the ideal form of freedom and what freedom should mean from the Islamic religious perspective, but also goes a step further by incorporating the notion of negative freedom, which is in the book, which emphasizes the ability and the autonomy of the people to choose and act. This expansion of the democratic framework within an Islamic context, I believe, is a significant contribution to the ongoing discourse. And second is the term Muslim Democrat, which is also comprised by Rashid Al-Nushi, and an extension of the concept of Muslim democracy. As Prof. Mazli has mentioned in his speech, aside from Sheikh Rashid Al-Nushi, another prominent global figure often associated with the term Muslim Democrat is none other than our current Prime Minister, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, which incidentally also has a biography entitled Anwar Ibrahim, The Evolution of a Muslim Democrat. So I think it will be interesting to explore the parallel between the two towering figures in politics and the Islamic world as well. And third, and finally, I know it's been a bit quite long, in relation to our honorable keynote speaker just now, Tansi Said I think he mentioned one of the key aspects of this book as well is the skepticism on democracy. And this is in light of this is understandable because this is in light of the ongoing war crimes and genocide perpetrated in Gaza by those who claim to be champions of democracy. And I think the latest update is that Israel was already attacked and occupied the Palestinian side of Rafah, and I think a few couple of hours ago. And I think this is specifically the question that this book spends many of its pages addressing. So, and I think this question is also applicable to both within the context of Malaysia as well as beyond. Therefore, these are the questions, although not meant to be exhaustive, are ones I believe will be interesting and enlightening to delve into in our upcoming discussion session. So ladies and gentlemen, in this regard, please let me introduce the list of our distinguished panelists. On my left here is our first discussant, Mrs. Nur Izzah Anwar, who needs no further introduction in Malaysian politics. She is a distinguished public servant, seasoned political activist with extensive legislative experience. Now currently serves as the chairperson of the Secretary of the Special Advisory Body to the Minister of Finance. And she is also currently the chairman for the think tank Social and Economic Research Initiative, SERI. Followingly, our second discussant is Dr. Yusra Al-Nushi, who is a special guest who just arrived from London yesterday. Hope the trip is okay. Dr. Yusra is the former international spokesperson for the Ennahda Party of Tunisia and also daughter of Sheikh Rashid Al-Nushi, receiving her PhD from the London University's School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS. She has been a prolific writer and articulate voice against authoritarianism and for the preservation of democracy. And our third speaker is Dr. Ahmad Galul, a distinguished guest and prominent political figure also in Tunisian politics. He holds a position in the Executive Bureau of the Ennahda Party and has previously served as the Minister of Youth Affairs and Sports in Tunisia. Additionally, Dr. Galul is recognized for his scholarly pursuits particularly in the realms of democracy and Islamic political philosophy, subjects which I had the privilege of quickly discussing with you yesterday in our trip together from the hotel to this institute. So before we proceed, please allow me to outline the format for today's discussion. I think the time has dragged a little bit, but I hope we can finish in time. Each hour stage discussion will be allocated 10 to 15 minutes, after which we will have a brief Q&A session. So without further delay, let us commence with our first eminent discussion, Mrs. Nurul Anwar, with the following question. Given your distinguished roles as a public servant and political activist, and your extensive legislative experience, could you share your insights on the concept of Muslim democracy, particularly concerning its relevance with the Malaysian context? Additionally, could you elaborate on how the points discussed align with the principles of democracy and constitutional governance, particularly concerning marginalized groups such as the B40 community, women, children, and others? Please, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Terima kasih Saudara Naim and of course my fellow panelists, Lalu as well as Yusra. It's such a privilege to have both of you here. I think your experiences have really led to a lot of inspiration and strength for all of us. Tan Sri, Samuel Abba, I think you've been described a lot of our sentiments rightfully and legitimately. And of course, Dr. Masli, the entire team at IAIS, Dr. Dr. Azman, who have made sure that we come here to discuss not just the launch of Dr. Andrew March, his book and his dialogue and his co-production with our beloved Sheikh Rashid Ghanouchi, but I think also to understand how we can sort of live a life that encapsulates many of the ideals that we believe in. Semuanya, the VIPs, our, Murad and everyone else is here. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And the official term used by the government is Salam Malaysia Madani, who many, maybe not in IAIS, have difficulty in understanding. I first heard this word and it's linked to the Sheikh Rashid Ghanouchi because Madani comes from the word Adana, civilization. And in 1996, when I was 16, Sri Anwar Ibrahim mentioned it in Parliament in describing a budget that celebrates and ensures that civil society, Masyarakat Madani, is given its rightful place in any country. And of course, when you ask me, Naim, back to the original question, in my formative years, I did not plan to be a politician or an activist. I planned to become a very safe, secure, financially engineer, electrical electronics. But as you know, Prof, in life we have plans, and then it just somehow takes place on its own. But I think it goes back to what then were the ideals governing at age 17 for a young Muslim in a multiracial nation, but understanding the importance of democratic institutions to protect your rights, vis-a-vis, of course, your rights as an individual, understanding the harmonious, like the Prof. Osnabaka, relationship with society, and of course your own responsibility, fire to the nation. And I felt Dr. Azam Kamini, it was not just Dr. Masli, I must say, I was so excited was the word, because Sheikh Rashid Ghanouchi went through so many experiences in terms of understanding the different systems, the different political parties that is offered in the spectrum of political life. And having gone through the different experiences, then you can safely say, which one do I choose, right? Which is aligned with my values as a Muslim, but which one do I can choose and practice with a vision, with principles, with progress that I use it. You talk about the bottom 40 of households, you talk about the marginalized. The best way to understand is to live along and understand the different segments of society that exist. And I saw it in him. I did not see many leaders in the Muslim world, and I have to say this, that kind of encapsulated that great or grand renaissance because of the race experience. So when he placed the word and the term Muslim Democrats, which we also affiliated in Malaysia, many asked, why? What does it have to do with Muslim? You see, I always felt the deep undercurrent of Islamophobia. I think it's very, very important for society, you mentioned it rightfully. Even now you see, right? It's always been there. The fact that we have to prove ourselves, not to have an iota of this sinister plan. You know, God forbid we mention the Sharia, goodness gracious, what would happen then? But it's always this line of defense, have to be defensive, have to be proactive in killing off. But it was the altruism, the genuine sincerity in his affirmation of being a Muslim Democrat, to the point that eventually, you know, he debunked and sort of separated political Islam from the needs of governing a nation. But it really was important because for me, as a young person, it cemented my deep conviction of my own identity. That is something that we have to not just espouse, promote, but encourage amongst many Muslims living in a world that's constantly facing many challenges. So that's one, I think, Azhar Hamini, and I have to give my hats off because he helped promote and introduce who Sheikh Rashid bin Rashid was before I finally had the opportunity to meet him. And you know, Dr. Andrew March also highlighted, he was very welcoming but very patient. And I think one of the deep tenets of being inclusive is what kind of practices do you have in your organization. Now, Al-Nahda, many of you might not know, I was fortunate enough to attend the party Muktamar conference, and I was shocked because you hear about political prisoners. You know about the trauma, the psychological trauma, the torture, the challenges they face. And then, of course, they will then participate actively in political life. Well, Al-Nahda conducts a psychological assessment before their candidates can actually contest elections, at least for the year that I went. Yeah? And I felt that was really a concrete realization of what you felt was an ideal leader. Because you assume that leaders in politics, and you know most of them are not emotionally or psychologically hinged. A lot of them have severe problems of understanding empathy, let alone treating people justly. And now the buzzword is of course narcissism, right? Because narcissism and narcissists fail to understand, fail to have empathy of the other, or even understand the need for self-reflection. And I felt Al-Nahda as a political party was ahead of its time. And Sheikh Rashid bin Rashid provided that kind of clear-cut vision, what you needed to do to ensure you survive 100, 200 years without causing much harm to other people. Yeah. So, for me, that deepened understanding of first and foremost, how do you lead based on ideals? Number two, how do you ensure it is practiced? Because towards the end, regardless of the clear-cut position vis-a-vis work with other political parties, even Dr. Ahmad Galul, when he came to see me, I think about a year ago, he was still very much optimistic, understanding the need to defend the ideals of democracy. A lot of us in Malaysia, especially looking at the West, are extremely cynical, extremely upset. But I think that's the beauty as well, because we cannot lower ourselves to their standards. And that's exactly what Sheikh Rashid bin Rashid kept bringing us ahead, even as he remains imprisoned at the age of 82. So bringing back to the issue of the responsibilities we have to ensure inclusivity, provide some degree of, degrees of, for families to live in a safe and qualitative environment. So these are the things for me, going back to what do you hold as your key value system as a Muslim Democrat? because sometimes I feel we like to separate and compartmentalize. Certain things we feel are dear to us, but somehow we take away that right when it is accorded to others. So this constant balance, I feel, and I end with this point, as much as it's inspiring, I was also trying to decipher, trying to understand why is it towards the end he made sure that before the imprisonment, that another party leadership cannot hold a position in the mosque. Was it to actually manage the growing suspicion, manage the prejudice and the actions that are taken vis-a-vis whatever that is seen as proactive is equated to being basically pro-terrorism, which is a charge that he's been done with. So I think what I want to know more as well is not so much the ideals, but actually how he played them in eventual party and organizational practice. Because that was such a courageous act for him. In fact, until today, if you speak to them, I think we were more cynical and angry when we had the difficult years, right? But I think for them, I've never seen such degree of, I would say, patience and perhaps an acceptance that in life there will be sacrifices. You still keep fighting the good fight, but still at the end of it, you make sure that you articulate a vision that has not changed, not one bit, from the first time he can spoke of it when we met in Istanbul. So that would probably be my take. I would want to know far more in terms of that, and I'm sorry to end with a question, but I think it's very, very important because the issues of social justice, the issues of eradicating poverty, the issues of making sure that we don't leave anyone behind, whether it's in the schools or whether it's in terms of assistance for food aid and so on and so forth. But how is it that we also govern political organizations so that they have a balance? One, they can be confident, and they are also making sure that status quo doesn't harm them for speaking up despite the prejudices. But on the other hand, also to protect ourselves, because Sheikh Ghanouchi is an honest broker. There's many honest brokers in the political system, but most and those who we are dealing with are rogue actors, rogue states, who don't at all espouse their sense of belief in the international humanitarian law and so on and so forth. So in that space, I feel we're lacking the options of how to act. And of course, you have to be sabar, I understand this, but my point is, these are the important strategic calculations that we can utilize as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Noida. I think that was a very excellent presentation from the Malaysian perspective, and also from the perspective of a seasoned politician and also activist. And also thank you very much, Ms. Noida, for helping me in my task as a moderator for the questions, a lot of questions. So a lot of questions that I can pass to our two other speakers. And I think a lot of important questions, fundamental questions. And I think one of it is how to balance between the interests of the political party as well as protecting yourself. I think that's one of the key questions that our next panelist can also answer. And also maybe on a lighter note, Mrs. Nurliza has reflected on her how she went into politics and as the daughter of a prominent politician in Malaysia. So maybe after this, Dr. Yusra can also reflect on how do you come into politics and how does your father, Mr. Ghanouchi, influence you. But the real question is, as someone deeply rooted in activism and politics, and as a daughter of Mr. Ghanouchi, a prominent figure in Tunisia, how have your personal experiences and upbringing shaped your views on the intersection of religion and politics. Moreover, how do you reconcile these perspectives with the principles of democracy and pluralism as explored in the book? And maybe also another question I think that Ms. Noriza posed is maybe a controversial question on why in the last moment of constituency during his tenure in the party, he proposed the policy to not hold any position in the mosque. Something like that. Not controversial, not provoking. But please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, Dr. Masli, Dr. Azman, and everyone at the Institute for this kind invitation. Thank you to the eminent keynote speakers. Thank you so much for your very touching and thought-provoking speeches. Ladies and gentlemen, dear brothers and sisters, good morning. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. It's a pleasure for me to be here among you today and to be here in Malaysia, a country that was visited by my father many times, both during the years of exile when he would come here and engage in debate and discussions with fellow opposition activists, scholars, thinkers, on these ideas, same ideas of Islam and democracy, democratic change, dealing with diversity, power sharing, coalition building, and then later, after the revolution, coming here many times again to discuss Tunisia's model of democratic transition, to learn lessons, and to seek support for Tunisia's economy and for Tunisia's democracy. And throughout all these visits to Malaysia, there were always refreshing opportunities for him that gave him hope and inspiration, with Malaysia providing a model for the harmony between Islam and democracy, and a very hopeful example of possibility of a Muslim democratic state where there is a thriving, diverse society and a flourishing, developed economy. Sadly, he cannot be with us here today with you today because he is spending his 368th day in prison, over a year, unjustly in prison under a new dictatorship this time. As you know, this is not his first imprisonment. This seems to be the price that must be paid for his lifelong struggle for freedom, justice, and democracy. And as he wrote recently from prison on the occasion of the passing of 1 year in prison, he continues to be committed to this struggle despite all the sacrifices. He wrote that this is a price that is worth paying for achieving democracy. So this tragic situation, both for my father and other political prisoners and for the whole of Tunisia, where we see this backsliding after all the achievements of the revolution, may make us wonder or ask whether these ideas that are in my father's books and are these ideas of Muslim democracy, whether they have been implemented or whether the last decade was in vain. So I would say that it is important to remember that revolutions do not happen in a linear way. There may be cycles, as we have, always counter-revolutions, following revolutions, where the forces of the past struggle against the forces of change, and we may not always go forward, we may go forward then back, but again the cycle starts again. And my father's imprisonment and that of dozens of others in Tunisia is a sign that Tunisians are not accepting that this is the end of the experiment, the end of the revolution, and this only strengthens their commitment to the ideas of freedom and democracy, and that they are willing to struggle for them. But as we look at the situation in Tunisia, I think it's important not to lose sight of the immense achievements that have been made in Tunisia in terms of these ideas that we have been discussing: pluralism, democracy, human rights, gender equality. And I think it's important to look back and remember those achievements that were in part led by another party, which was the first and most organized party after the revolution. So if we look at the idea of pluralism, for instance, in post-revolution Tunisia, both in terms of texts and practice, I think it is now recognized that the Tunisian constitution, promulgated in 2014, is a model and the most progressive constitution in the region in terms of enshrining freedom, equality, human rights, and also in the manner it was written. The way it was written itself was a very inclusive process where everyone was involved, no one was excluded, and the result itself, obviously, as I said, enshrines these ideas that were at the core, at the center of my father's writings. So in this view, if we go back to my father's writings, pluralism is an inherent natural feature of humanity and of God's creation, and democracy is the way of dealing with that diversity, religious, political, ethnic, cultural. And it's not merely a theoretical idea. At the practical level, also if we look at Nahda's trajectory, we see instances from the 80s of working with others from across the political spectrum, coalition building with other parties, with unions, with others, to both to struggle against dictatorship, but also to elaborate a common vision for post-dictatorship Tunisia. And this is what laid the ground for the groundbreaking Troika coalition government after the revolution, which was a rare example of a coalition between secularists and Islamists in the region. And the pre-revolution alliances laid the ground for that, where these parties, from communists to liberals to nationalists, did not only work together to oppose the pre-revolution dictatorship, but engaged in debates and discussions to agree on common ground for a democratic and free Tunisia. So this was done through, as I said, dialogue and consensus building, which is a key idea in my father's work. Not only, as it's often described, as a pragmatic way of dealing with the current political diversity, but as a genuine, important, and necessary method to build common ground, to build trust in society and among the political elites. So, and you know how this was very important in terms of preserving Tunisia's democratic transition and protecting it from the coups and civil wars that plagued the other transitions for 10 years. And my father still continues to believe that consensus building was what protected Tunisia's democratic transition and continues to be important now in opposing the return of dictatorship and the struggle to restore democracy in Tunisia. And this is why the Nahda is engaged in constant dialogue with other opposition parties, and this is what has led partly to now the current regime being isolated and most other parties moving to the position that was adopted by Nahda following the coup, of seeing this as a coup that must be opposed. I will try to be brief because I was also from you. So the other important point is gender equality, which is another idea that has been at the core of my father's writing, including a book dedicated to the issues of equality and women's liberation. And this was something also that has been implemented after the revolution, not only in terms of enshrining gender equality in the constitution in a very unprecedented way, where the state pledges to protect the rights of Tunisian women that have already been achieved in Tunisia, to advance them, to ensure equality in all fields, to ensure equal opportunities at all levels and in all fields, to eliminate violence against women. And there was a groundbreaking law also issued by Parliament on this, on the elimination of all forms of violence against women. And also something that was unprecedented, where the state also commits to ensure gender parity in all elected councils. And this was also achieved in practice, where after the revolution in the elected Constituent Assembly, out of 59 members, women members of the Assembly, 41 were from Ennahda, 41 out of 89 Ennahda members of the Assembly, so almost half, which was not achieved by any other parties, including those parties that had used this issue to attack and use doubt and allegations on this issue against Islamists in general. Also in practice, Ennahda put forward the late Mrs. Mahazia Al-Abizi as the Vice President of the Assembly, which was at the time the highest position occupied by a woman in the Arab world, and she played a very important role in terms of conflict resolution and dialogue within the Assembly, including during many of the political crises at the time. So as we see these rights and these achievements being challenged today, we should not lose sight of these immense achievements. In terms of human rights also, as you know, this has been a key focus of my father's writings, the idea of universal human rights. This has been enshrined in the Tunisian constitution, including freedom of faith and conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of association, all political rights, as well as social and economic rights. And we saw in practice the elimination of arbitrary detentions. After the revolution, there were no longer any political prisoners in Tunisia, and sadly now, after the coup of 2021, we see the return to constant violations of human rights in Tunisia, and the return of political prisoners in Tunisia. So as we now experience this backsliding in Tunisia and around the world, and as we observe also, as we are all preoccupied with what is happening currently in Gaza, in Palestine, and the genocide that is broadcast live on our screens and on social media, which is being ignored or tolerated or supported by governments that promote or espouse theoretically these same ideals of universal human rights and democracy, as has been pointed out by others, is now feeling this anger at these double standards and skepticism and doubt about the validity of these ideas, about which my father had written for half a century. However, it is important to remember that our belief in these ideas was never simply pragmatic or as a tool or to appease anyone, but out of a sincere belief that they come from our own understanding of Islam, and that these are necessary, these values of justice and freedom and human rights. And it's also important to remember that at the same time that my father constantly promoted these ideas, he had a critical approach where he emphasized their shortcomings, or the shortcomings of their application, and was always critical of the way they were selectively applied. So now, as we face the current double standards in applying these principles, it's important to continue to believe in their validity and continue to strive to apply them equally and justly. And this continues to be my father's message, even as he is in prison today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusra. Another testing? Yes. Okay. My freedom of expression is restored. Testing? Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Yusra Danushi, I think, for her excellent presentation on an elaboration on the concept of pluralism, democracy, and basically Sheikh Danushi's thought in general. I think it's very elaborate and also very complete explanation, and also for her intimate perspective as the daughter of Sheikh Danushi on how Sheikh has been very persistent in maintaining and standing for his principles. And based on our discussion, brief discussion yesterday, she mentioned that Sheikh Rashid is, even in prison, is fasting and doing qiyam every day since 7th of October, and only rest for a while when there's a ceasefire happening. And maybe Dr. Ahmad Galu can explain more on this after this. And for that, I would like to pass the mic to Dr. Ahmad Galu with the question. I'm sure many members of our audience is interested in this more interesting aspect of the discourse, which is the question how Islamic is the concept of Muslim democracy truly is, and to what extent they are compatible or can be reconciled. And additionally, based on your experience, both political and personal, can you offer some insights on how Sheikh Danushi or An-Nahda as a movement remains true and consistent with this principle? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bismillah. Well, I'm here not as a politician or ex-minister, but I would rather be as a student for Sheikh Rashid, with whom I've been for more than 3 decades. So first when we were in London, and then back to Tunisia, and now he's in prison, and I'm outside Tunisia again. But before that, if you would allow me to stand up, as people are getting tired, so that I can see with whom I'm speaking, and then they can see me. To tell the truth, while I've been listening to all the speeches before, and speaking about Sheikh Rashid, and that it is unjust that he is right now in prison, while he was in power as chair of the parliament. When the daughter of His Highness Prime Minister, she was with us in 2016, when Dr. Anwar Ibrahim was in prison, actually. And the question is this: I mean, in which state are we better? Where we were in power, or where we are in power, or in opposition, and sometimes being in prison? It is hard. I mean, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, there is a dua where one prays Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he, from fitna to al-ghina is about whether we are able to stand by our values and to be fighting for those values in whatever state we are. When we defend the values of democracy, we do not defend them just because we are in power and that democracy works for us. We don't defend these values because others believe in them. We defend these values because we believe that those values are the best values which suits us. And these values, we didn't believe in democracy because the West defends democracy. And we are not going to put them aside because right now, in these days, we can see that the political elite of the West is not democratic, or is being in a state of hypocrisy in regard to the values of justice, human rights, the rule of law. And because our brothers and sisters in Gaza are being raped and genocide, there is huge genocide right now in Gaza. But it's not only in Gaza. These values are suffering from a genocide around the world. And we can see what is happening in the United States, in the West, in France, in many countries. I had a call with Sheikh Rashid before he's been taken to prison, just a few months before. I was telling him, when you see Sheikh Rashid, he's asked me not to go back home. So I told him, Sheikh Rashid, I mean, how could the coup happen in Tunisia? You've done all what you've done, all this consensus. And then yet, this did not save you from being, from a coup. This did not save us, Tunisia. How could the coup happen if not supported by regional and international democratic powers? Told me, you see, Ahmed, we need to keep believing these values because it's not only us, we have friends around the world who will be defending these values. If you remember Andrew last time when we met, he told me, did he tell you who are those who are supporters of these values? Well, we can see them right now. We can see those students around the world defending these values. So this, us as Muslims, we are defending these values because it is our right as individuals and as Muslims to live in a free, just, democratic societies where we can deal with our differences in a democratic way, because democracy right now is perceived as the best tools that can manage our differences. And in a democratic society, differences are allowed. And this is actually what our Sharia directs us to do. If we go back to, for example, I don't like to go really deeply in academic right now, in exposition of the argument. I think my friend Dr. Misawi, he's had a very extensive article about Ashur in one of his books, and one can go through that. But let me put this. Let me go back. I mean, starting from Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim, and before with them, and then we go to Shatibi, we go to Ashur and Sheikh Rashid. The Islam, when we defend the concept of maslahah, interest, you see, Shatibi describes maslahah as what brings benefit in this life and brings reward in the hereafter. الصلاح في الدنيا والجزاء في الآخرة. And this defines the universality of the benefits and interests of the values which Islam defends. And as Andrew has mentioned, and as Sheikh Rashid is saying when he criticizes what is happening right now in Gaza, he says it's not about democracy. It is about those who believe that they have the exclusive right of enjoying the benefit of democracy, while they deny the others that right. And And we, as Muslims, do have the obligation of defending the universality of these values. So we defend these values because we believe in them, we believe that these values are good for us as Muslim society. And the second part is that we as Muslims, when we say Muslim democracy, Sheikh Rashid said, why are we using the term Muslim democracy if we compare it with the term Islamist democracy, if it can be used? Because it said that there are Muslims who believe in democracy and there are Muslims who believe in tyranny. And this was on the 25th of Ramadan last year. He's made a speech. And there was a picture of the political prisoners. In that picture were brothers, people from the extreme left to liberals to, just normal citizens, to people who are part of the Islamist group. He says, you see, right now we have this opposition. We have these people who are defending democracy, and we should have another picture where we should put the previous tyrant, Tunisia Ben Ali, and his officers, and we need to put someone else with them, that is Qais Said, the actual president of the country. Actually, Qais Said presents himself as someone who is defending Islamic values and defending Islam. But he said we cannot have Qais Said with the values inside the values of the revolution, even if he presents himself as defending Islam, because he's not defending the values of Islam. This is a tyrant. This is someone who is, not preserving the justice, freedom, which are the core values of our Sharia. So can we have a middle path between those who are defending the values of justice, freedom, and democracy, and those who are defending the values of tyranny? He said no. There is no middle way between these values. And here, Rashid Ghanouchi is someone who has been described as the pragmatic politician. Trace a thick line between where we can be pragmatic, where we can have consensus, with whom can we have consensus, and those whom we have to be, I would use the term radical, in separation. In his last letter, which he sent us from his prison after 1 year of imprisonment, he's asked two questions. Whether what he said, whether it was something right to be said at that moment, because it was a bit extreme. When I heard him, I said, Sheikh Rashid now would like to get into prison. And I knew it. For 2 days he's been, after 2 days he's been captured. He said, our opposition to the coup, it is something which we had to do. If you remember, there's a picture where Sheikh Rashid was almost alone in front of the door, which was chained. Behind it there was a tank. Right now, almost all the political elite is, let's say, with us. And almost the majority of the people are with us. More than 90% of the Tunisian population are not with us. And Sheikh Rashid was saying, what did I do? How was I able to survive? He said, prison usually breaks a person. So it is hard for a prisoner to keep strong and to keep fighting for his values. He said, when I thank Allah that most of the political prisoners did not give up fighting for their values. And these prisoners, they are Islamists, as as I said, there are part of them, there are extreme left, liberals, on the right, just Democrats. And Sheikh Rashid, he said, these they are still standing by the values. And what he did, well, he's busy reading actually. He's read a lot of books. Yes. He said prison is an opportunity to meditate about your values and your ideas, to write and to read. During this year, I've read the encyclopedia of Ibn Abi. This is an encyclopedia of history and the time of Islahi in Tunisia. So this is it's not just history. The book of Sierra Nabawiyya of Salabi, the volumes of Byron Khamis, the history of the Western philosophy, and a number of other books in religion, philosophy, and Sierra. And I again reread the book of Muqaddimah, the book of the book of Ibn Ashur, Islam, and his book about Uqas Sharia, and the other book, and he's read them many times, and he's had an opportunity to reread them again. And Akhlaq Islamiyya, the father, his son, Ibn Ashur. Prison, in general, is good for a mu'min. And Amr al-Mu'mini kulluhu lahu khayr. I will not, but let me read the last part of it. That most of the families, political families in Tunisia, are gathered around the values of democracy. And what happened in Tunisia, that it is a coup. This is something important, because democracy cannot live under the shadow of militarism. That, or any free thinking. Mother Party is one of the main titles for this defending these values, defending freedom, and that freedom cannot be cracked, or it is a whole. The same thing is about our values. We either stand by them or we give them up. So how Islamic is what Sheikh Rashid defending or fighting for? It is, and actually let me go back to what you mentioned, that it is fasting every day and making qiyam every day. You know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where one Sahaba came to ask him, I mean, what can we do to reach a level of mujahid? He said, well, you can, unless we keep making siyam every day and qiyam every day until that mujahid comes back home. And that is why Sheikh Rashid stopped his siyam for 3 days during the time of his ceasefire, and then he went back. This is one of the highest level of our understanding of Jihad. And this level is that we need to stand by our values, to stick to those values, to keep fighting for those values. I personally don't see Sheikh Rashid Manouchi as a victim, because when was he instated? Was it when he was chair of parliament? Or the head of the biggest party that is governing, when he wanted to nominate someone as a minister, he would nominate him? Or right now, when he is in prison? I mean, so he's not a father, he's not a victim. This is someone, when in 2013, we were more than 180,000 shouting so that we exclude one political party from participating in drafting the constitution. said, no. He who accepts the revolution is the son of, he who accepts the constitution is the son of the revolution. And he was referring to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, "Man dakhala bayta Abi Sufyan fahuwa amin." These are our values, which we need to stick by them whether we are instead of power or whether we are fighting oppression. And this is why those values are Islamic, and this is why these values, we need them, especially right now, when other people are giving them up. Because there's a crisis right now, nobody knows. We as Muslim society, we are going through a crisis, yes. But there is a problem within the West also. And we do believe that these values in which we believe, Islam, freedom, justice, are a good answer for the crisis through which humanity is going through. This is why democracy, when we believe in it, is part of what part of the answers which the world needs from us to give them a different. When Tahir Rashid in his book, Usul al-Ijtima'i, says, when democracy is part of Islam, but we Muslims will have a better democracy. When Sheikh Rashid tries to explain in which way we as Muslims are giving a better answer than the democracy which is provided by the national state, which says that democracy has borders. These values do have borders, like the Roman Colosseum. There's someone who is worthy to be a citizen, and others are worthy to be killed in the Colosseum. We Muslims don't believe in that. Umar Khattab said, so we Muslims, we do have higher values, a different understanding of the universe of these values, and these values must bring benefit in this dunya, and then we will be worthy of having those rewards in the day of judgment. So yes, these values are Islamic, and these values are those values which humanity really now need. And whether Sheikh Rashid is in prison, whether he's in power, whether he's alive or whether he's not with us, the importance is whether these values can outlive these crises through which we are going through or not. And I do believe that these values is what will make him outlive the crisis, and it is an answer which we Muslims can participate with others around the world in solving what humanity is going through in this current time and crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The two lectures from prison. I think thank you both very much for conveying this heartfelt message and very motivating message, if I may say. We have now reached the interactive session. We would love to hear from the audience, so please raise your hand if you have any questions. When you are called on, kindly state your name and affiliation if you have any. And I think we are a bit extended in terms of our time, I think, but I think 50 minutes is okay. If you can slot in 5 questions, but I think I'll take the first 3 first. So I see a couple of hands there. Gentleman with the white shirt, and then the lady with the red dress. And I'm trying to be fair with the sides here as well. Hello, Mr. Monzak, and the gentleman with the black jacket. So please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ahmad Muslim Ali, and now I am a bit dismayed, to say the least,
affiliations, if you have any?
Well, I am here on Monaco. Now, I'm a bit dismayed, to say the least, that in many discourses on politics and democracy, there seems to be no voice, not much voice, criticizing the current political system that is in place in many countries of the world. Whereas this political system is fraught with problems. This political system, what I would label as the partisan political system, and also the democracy that goes with it, we shall call it partisan democracy. This is a democracy that is used not to unite people, but to come together and agree to disunite between ourselves and then fight against each other, just like in a football match. And then we expect our nations, our countries, to be run in a peaceful, effective manner, and so on. So, my question is, how about our brother Rashid Benushi? Did he address this problem of partisan political system and partisan democracy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next one is from the lady with the red dress.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Mira. I'm from Indonesia, but Malaysia has been my home since 14 years ago. I'm actually attached to International Islamic University Malaysia. Just now, I'm very enlightened by the amount of work that three of you have actually done in the landscape of politics. But if I want to ask, I resonate closely, especially when you say revolution doesn't happen in linear. And I think the fact when if we ask for a linear way, we cannot hope for the sun to rise from the west, which is against the Sunnatullah. Sunnatullah is, of course, revolutions requires us a constant commitment to always focus on rapid, what I heard a lot is rapid adaptation. This is what I heard a lot from when I was visiting US recently. US is really committed on rapid adaptations and also on the commitment for exponential growth. I think this is what we haven't seen much from the Islamic world, where we focus on keep changing, keep adapting, commitment on making sure that the growth is there, the delta growth is there. But I haven't seen a lot from the conversation that we have today on the commitment, making sure that we will be able to bounce back, the resilience, making sure that people will continue to fight, especially the youth. But with all due respect, the three of you, which is kind of similar to my generation, we need to have someone today, by right, with 20 years old and have the mindset, the similar mindsets to what we have today. But we hardly hear that. We hardly hear the young ones speak the same kind of language, have the same dream. And I'm worried actually, the fact that we will not be able to have this dream in the next 5 years or 10 years, because what we see today, even for Gaza, the Gen Z, have a different kind of language to what we have been discussing in this room. So I think making sure what are the three of your unelected, all the panelists commitment in making sure that you will have someone that will continue to fight. I think that's the simple question that I would like to ask today. Thank you.
I think there's the third question is from the gentleman at the front. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rahim Kamil Sulaiman. I'm a petroleum engineer. But over the last 15 years, my interest has been in economic history. At the age of 70, I feel I'm getting young again. Not for the reason someone is laughing at it, but I feel very young because I started to migrate from being a petroleum engineer to study economics. Not very far from this place, just next door actually. And why I feel young is because the process of economic change takes a lot of time. If you look at the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just to abolish riba as the basis of economy took him 20 years. From the start of the Hijrah to the last ayat, the final revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's 20 years. I would like to pose this question to Nur Izzat and the two panelists, because the Madani concept, we need to understand that there was no Medina at the time of the Prophet, when the Prophet migrated. It was Yathrib. So it's very appropriate for the current government to portray, to present Islam as a Madani, a civilization. As a socialist, when I was first studying in Australia, I felt very refreshing to have Islam represented as a civilization. In those days of Usra, I know that I've always been wondering what is the end game of a movement. If it takes 20 years for an economic principle to be changed from riba to non-riba, how long will it take a democratic process of election in Malaysia to have the Madani economic development project rooted in the society? Because by that time I'll be 90. That's what I need to get an answer right now. So a democratic process is too long to wait when I turn 90. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I'll take the first two questions first, if you may. So the first one is related with dismay with partisan political system and partisan democracy and how to deal with that. And I think the second question is the commitment to cultivate younger generations, maybe train on this concept of Muslim democracy. And the last one is how to develop a Madani, when can we expect a Madani economic development project? I think it's a bit open-ended, so maybe I pass to as our panelists decide. Yes. Yes, please.
We are sorting out the awaliyat of answering. Okay. I think, a lot of thought-provoking questions, and I think, I'm still reeling from some of the sharing provided by Dr. Gadul. I love what you told us, because I think at the end of the day, it's one thing advocating theory, but actually living through and also proving through action that you believe in values that you've spoken of in the past is another. So I go back to the first question, but I wanted to address the second one. There's a term that Gen Z staff members of mine who said, if it's not on TikTok, it didn't happen. Right? So clearly today's session is only a figment of your imagination because it's not on TikTok. And I learned it the hard way because I successfully contested, the Mazdi can also relate to this, in 3 consecutive elections, and I won until the last general elections. And that was the time where, honestly, for youngsters, they really resonated with getting information, I'm not sure about you, getting information, getting an understanding who the candidates were through TikTok. So different platforms is a way for us to, of course, communicate. The message is similar, but how which we disseminate that kind of content matters. And I think that's a challenge, if anything else. I remember visiting Indonesia. This was just after Reformasi, the change of government. The then president was the late B.J. Habibie, and it was in ATV. And I remember there were student leaders speaking on stage with ministers. And they were relatively unknown, but the crowd, that kind of semangat, that kind of zeitgeist, that kind of spirit that you see across American universities, but of course in Indonesia. And I think it's very important because you actually want the young to absorb and continue to carry the tradition of not just championing democracy, but more importantly, I feel championing justice. So, to that question, I think it's about extending or bringing forward the discussions, the essays that Professor Dr. Andrew March kind of co-wrote with Shema Ganushi to a larger audience in universities, and we can certainly consider that. And I'm not sure of your TikTok account, Ranu. I will try to scan, but I think in order for Tunisia to kind of go forward, like it or not, the different mediums would have to be we have to have some degree of presence. Now, in terms of the discussion of partisan democracy, it's always a very challenging dilemma. I think in an era where you can't control what kind of information that goes out, you can't control how information is absorbed or interpreted. I remember those days it was always great to have engagement with the audience. And these days we're always advised, even for me, you have to make sure that it's not misinterpreted when the edits take place. So for me, absolutely, inclusion means you have to celebrate the different voices in society. What do you do though when it's laced by vitriolic content, slander that borders on incitement? So these are challenges. I remember when I was in my first term as Member of Parliament, balancing the need to protect Malaysia's security vis-a-vis ensuring that that does not become an excuse to shut any form of dissent. So grappling with this, I think in the first past the post system, which we inherited from our former colonial masters or oppressors, the British, there are discussions where first past the post could be perhaps evolving to a system of proportional representation that's in a way more robust in representing the different voices, especially when parties representing 7%, 9% of the voting bank can at least have their data under the Dewan Rakyat. So I think it's crucial to realize this, but it is really going to be a difficult realization if you do not belong in a particular coalition, especially in Malaysia. That was also the thinking behind the coalition building that took place, whether 2013, whether 2018, pre-elections and post-elections. So that would be my take on it. But I agree, Malaysia has become far more polarized today. I see the effects of the pandemic, where schools were shut, and your engagement with politicians have become more of seeing two different sets of law being applied. So people right then resonate more with whom? With religious leaders, right? With leaders who represent, they feel, a position that's separate from the powers that be. So this deep-seated angst against status quo is something that we have to really understand in the entire spectrum of building a civil society. Because I feel that, now I'm a Gen X 1980 maybe. So from Gen X, I think we do feel, of course, sandwiched and squeezed between the boomers and the millennials. But the point is, across every generation, first you have your respective challenges, and the best organization actually is one that's able to harness the energy across the different generations. And this is, of course, proven through studies and so on. So, linked to this, I think also, I'd like to hear the Galu's point or opinion on the dangers of modern Khawarij, right? Because in terms of the spectre of the different segments, how do we then bring it into fruition of better understanding today? My generation, we used to go to book launches. Perhaps, I don't know, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Gen Z or millennials, but it's a different format, perhaps, that would be more enticing. So, right now, how do you fit in the grand content of Sheikh Rashid Ghanouchi's thinking and the mere seconds of TikTok? I think is necessary. I think it's something that we can run away from, but it's also something that we could perhaps do better if we include younger and leaders from the different generations to move ahead with the strategy. And the third bit.
Fortunately, I think IAIS has also a TikTok handle, so that's good.
Now, please don't forget, you have to follow the TikTok handle and encourage others to do so. So IAIS will have a nice cat edit of this event. Well done. Please, a round of applause to our moderator who projected the future the needs. Now, in terms of the final question, there is a premise on economy Madani. Dr. Nong Sari Radhi is one of the key architects and providing the vision that governs the Madani economy or the concept. So the way I see it, and I'm recalling the late Chief Dr. Siddiq Fadil, who passed away sadly before the government of the unity government came to power. And he was very clear-cut in stating, if you want to look at one of the best constitutions, I think Tunisia comes in mind because it's really futuristic, taking into account gender equality, and of course empowering women in the top positions of government. But Piagam Madinah, you see, it is very, very important because at the time you are talking about an inclusive governance, as espoused by Sheikh Dr. Siddiq Fadil, that the Prophet, peace be upon him, it is about Medina that offers and accords protection not just to Muslims but non-Muslims. So sometimes you don't have to look far, in fact, in order to understand what is our motivation in making sure that we provide justice, we provide a space for everyone to enjoy, not just the Tunisian sun, but the Malaysian sun is actually the Medina Constitution. And I think that's why in the agenda that you target, of course, we all know the weaknesses and the failures of the capitalist system. I think you can even refer to Adam Tooze, as a Colombian professor, who wrote about how COVID showcased the deep schism, whether in socio-economic or even in terms of services that are accorded in healthcare and the hospitals enjoyed in the different strata of society. So for me, it is time for us not to forget, as we move out from a post-pandemic future, we're still living in a new normal. We're never going to go back to the time before the pandemic hit. Similarly, whether the crisis in Tunisia was happening when the rogue state aggressively attacked with a lot of support from the richest nations in the world today, that should serve as fodder. How do we rethink? How do we open up the spaces? If you talk about Bangsa Moro, there's a new legislation. So many opportunities accorded to us. The point is, are we going to follow the money? Or are we able to make the changes in our behavior, in our engagement, in even building economic cooperation and linkages? From the perspective of jihad, I think personally, talk about fasting, is doing the qiyam. Extend that to the states. How many states, how many nations have the courage to do things differently? And this will mean, first, you will cause some degree of perhaps internal crisis. And number two, you will perhaps lose the general elections. I mean, these are real pragmatic considerations. You know, I think that's why one of the oft-repeated favorite terms that voters like is stability. This coalition provides stability. And with stability, what is going to be the norm? Status quo, right? Nothing really changes too much. So I think that space where you can initiate reforms, of course, it will be gradual, but the point is we can't lose hope, and that's why we need you after you finish your economic degree at this young, tender age of 17 to actually participate, because any Madani framework with clear-cut targets, improving female labor participation, making sure you are far more humane and improve in your degree of human capital involvement, it cannot succeed if the government is doing it alone. So I think this is where, again, going back to Madani, going back to the Madinah Constitution, going back to inclusivity showcase through Tunisia. Because remember, a man was self-immolating, and that was in Tunisia, in the streets of Tunisia. And from there, you harness that kind of self-implosion, anger, anguish due to the economic circumstances, and you came up with a constitution that is ahead of its time. So I think it's a reminder that whatever we do is actually looking through the different tenets of society. And I'll end with this point. In 2021, in Permata, the constituency I represented then, we conducted a multidimensional poverty index study. Because we didn't want to forget how people suffered at the height of pandemic. Maybe for those of us who have the comforts of our home, you know, we still have a home even though we can't get out. You know, humans are social animals, and that was already painful enough. But for the B10, as in the bottom 40% of households and the lowest rung, how did they face and what were the types of deprivations from lacking in savings, from having intergenerational poverty? Number 4, child number 4 is far worse off versus child number 1 because of the lacking in access. So we wanted to record this, and alhamdulillah, we finally came up with a concrete, validated report. So I think whatever you are trying to do is to make sure that it's scientifically sound, it's robust in its research, and we as Muslims place the best benchmark in any sort of effort or objective or mission that we're trying to target and achieve.
I'll briefly just address two of the comments made. The first about partisan politics and its problems. And the point I want to make is that now there is, in Tunisia particularly, and actually around the world, there is the rise of populism, which blames all crises and all problems on parties and on politicians. And this is what was used in Tunisia to justify the coup in 2021. And although we all recognize the problems that can happen with partisan politics and rigidity and hostility and exclusion, I think it's important to remember that, for instance, in the case of Tunisia, we try to go beyond this, and this is in two ways. By first making sure that parties are always reforming themselves, renewing their membership and leadership, and their interaction with the wider public, and at the same time ensure that there aren't these fixed boundaries where partisan aims are a priority, and that they always come second to the national interest, and this was what was demonstrated in Tunisia, and this is how we were able to build, across ideological alliances, which was not easy, and I think you know this in Malaysia, as you have a coalition government as well with a larger number of parties. So the problem is not the party system itself, but how to make sure that parties go beyond this and are able to work together and cooperate to achieve common interests, and also to make sure that there is progress and reform and regeneration within each party, which is a challenge for those parties. You mentioned the challenge of stability. This was one of the problems in Tunisia, where more or less all other parties, apart from Ennahda, broke down and disappeared. So this was one of the problems where we had 8 governments in the last 10 years, or I think more than 8 governments, because of this. But despite this, there is always the need to reform our parties. And in terms of youth engagement, this is a challenge that we must recognize. In Tunisia and across the region, there is insufficient youth engagement, there is apathy, there is lack of trust in most institutions among Arab youth. And this is something that needs to be addressed. And this is something that we have attempted to address in Tunisia, particularly, as you know, one of the aims of the post-revolution period was to go from a centralized government to sharing power. So there was parliament, the government, and the presidency. There was a sharing of power. There was also the initial steps of sharing power between the center and the regions, which was one of the main drivers of the revolution, the marginalization of the regions. And this was starting to be addressed through the local governments and local elections, which we had for the first time in 2018. And in the Constitution itself, the chapter on local government is a central one and a very important one. And we saw how through the elections, a lot of youth and women were integrated in governance because of the electoral law that was adopted that made sure that a third of candidates were under 35 and half of candidates were women. So this is one of the ways it was addressed. And sadly now we go back to the centralization of power and trying to undo all these achievements. But inshallah, as I said, this is not the end.
Thank you, Professor. Well, just in short, there is in verse 118, Surah Hud, where Allah said, if He wanted to, He would have made all mankind as one nation. However, He's created them different. And this is the purpose of their creation. So the idea of having a heterogeneous society where everybody is like others is not the purpose of creation of mankind. So we are created as different from each other, different in our beliefs, different in our interests, and we have conflicts. So in which way should we manage those differences and conflicts? And the idea of democracy, I think, is right now one of the best ways which humanity have created to manage differences. So a democracy is not a tool to make people like each other. It is a tool to manage differences. And that is the purpose of it, peacefully. Otherwise, we will manage differences in other ways, by using coercion, by using force, by using what Ibn Khaldun described as asabiyya mutaghallida. When we have another option, that is managing our differences peacefully, in a free way, and allowing people, citizens, to choose what difference And democracy has many weaknesses. Democracy is not a religion. It's not Quran. The Constitution is not Quran. The Constitution, it is a civil act. It is a social act between different people who are different from each other. And this is why the Act in Medina is important, because it is an inclusive act from the Prophet ﷺ to Muslims, non-Muslims, Jewish. It is a civil act. Why should the Prophet ﷺ draft Act in Medina? And the second point is this. When Sheikh Nashur defines the concept of al-daruriyat, the necessities, he says that al-daruriyat is not what preserves life, because animal society do have the means, in a way, how to preserve their life. So they don't need the Sharia to be revealed. Daruriyat in Sharia is what creates Madaniyah, what creates civilization, what makes us human. But Allah is telling us that we as a human, we are created different. And my last point is this. Imam Shatibi, not Ibn Ashur, he says that the highest aim of maqasid is that أن نعبد الله اختيارا كما نحن له عبيد اختيارا, so that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we freely choose to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as we are, as He's created us without our choice. So the idea of freedom is very important, and this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed us to be different, and He's going to judge us in regard to how are we managing those differences. And if I go further, I mean, qital, that is fighting, where a person could be killed, is allowed so that there is no fitna, meaning there is no ikrah, no coercion, because fitna meaning is coercing someone in regard to his beliefs, which is the highest level of coercion, not only coercing someone in regard to his actions. So we see that freedom is the initial starting point for us Muslims in regard to our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in regard to applying Sharia law. And that is why someone who is not free, is not addressed by the Sharia. If you are not free, you cannot be responsible. If you are not rational, you cannot be responsible. Less than mukallaf. So two conditions for someone to be a mukallaf, that is aql, rational, is able to use his intellect, secondly that he is free. So we are all moving, we as Muslims, moving around these concepts. The modern, and my last point is this, and this relates to the concept of Madaniyah, and the second concept which Sheikh Raj speaks about, he speaks about Mujtama' Ahli. that even trees and stones and roads and so on. This is what our Madaniyah, this is our civilization, this is what makes us, worthy of being Viceroy Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Democracy right now is a way of managing our differences. We should not be impatient with those who are different from us, different from in their beliefs, different in their understanding of Islam. So Islam is really giving us this opportunity the branding word, think outside of the box. Well, yes, it gives you this idea to be free, to be an agent.
Can I get your final point?
This was my that was my final comment. Yes, go.
Thank you very much. I think, okay, yeah, as long as you promise 1 minute.
It's not 1 minute. I wanted to, because your final point reminded me of Sheikh Rashid Ladushi's words, in terms of issues of Muslim citizenry. There is no perfect system, and the world we live in is not an abode for establishing an ideal society. So just be aware of the limits, I think, and why we ended up choosing for democracy. That's it.
Thank you very much. I think everybody is very excited to have our feast on the AWANI open house, but maybe do not curtail the freedom of speech and expression. I think maybe take 2 more, but only if you promise to make it very brief, and also maybe the answers also very brief, less than 1 minute. Then maybe we can get 2 more. So we're going to be fair. So on this side, I take the gentleman in the front first, and then the lady at the back with the grey hijab. I think that's the last 2. I'm sorry. Professor Dr. Andrew. Sorry.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ilyas Sheikh. I'm coming from Asia Pacific University, APU. I'm a Malaysian, but I am originally from Myanmar. You know Myanmar? I believe you know. Okay, a lot has been said here. Oh, I'm a lecturer in APU.
It's like 11 brief. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
please.
A lot has been said here. I think everybody grasps the meaning, the real value and define in the context of Islam, which is very much not contradictory to the conventional definitions. So what is the problem here? Still in the Muslim countries, we can see we have a lot of corruptions, a lot of abuse in the powers. There's no humanitarian values. You can see a lot of things ongoing. What is the problem? You might understand here. We can re-emphasize the values. They are similar to the conventional term.
I'm really sorry, Professor, please.
Sorry, just a moment. We have to re-emphasize here. Just give you one example. For example, in Myanmar, the Aung San Suu Kyi, he was the promoter of democracy, advocacy for democracy. And the same person, a democratic political activist, a politician, denied the rights of Rohingya in the ICJ. You see the same person. So what is the problem here? Now, in just the last 2 days, in Myanmar there is no government.
Stop you there. So the problem with hypocrisy.
The
one
problem here is
democratic, and then
it is the value that we have is we have to reintegrate with our faith and iman and taqwa. Otherwise, we cannot integrate. We have the norms, the values are there in the book. Islam is a constitutional.
Okay, I have to stop you there because the lecture already. If you have any questions, I have to pass it to the back. Any questions?
We have to integrate our values with the humanity.
Sorry for that.
Assalamualaikum.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much for having the program. My name is Kalina. So basically, a question and just to understand that everything seems to be connected. We'll be talking about being pragmatic in democracy, and I understand that a lot of this is saying about how the individual himself or herself is the one that brings the value for us, specifically Muslims, that in their practice of democracy, that they are the person that represents that value. But how about when we think in terms of future, when we have this leadership that needs to avoid, where we do not train, which someone has already mentioned, the future generation of leaders would also imbue this values. How do we do that? That's where philosophy comes into place, and I'm very happy that we have a professor here in political philosophy, and I would like to ask a question. It seems that the definition of democracy is not clear, and this happened also in my field, philosophy of science. We have this science of method, this science of body of knowledge, this science expression of reality. But in democracy, I'm hearing is a method that is a way of dealing with diversity, and democracy is what is the essence of democracy, and we need this, and we need philosophy in order to determine the ideal, not to say that the ideal is achievable, but the fact that the ideal is what would eventually bring the Islamic civilization back. And I've also checked on Professor Andrews' video on the Caliph of Man, and I'm very impressed that he mentioned the role of the what's the word? And how they play a role in deciding the proper democracy and leadership. So, is it possible to have this in the Ummah, as in a group of this leadership that will help observe democracy in every nation and decide the way out? Thank you. Yes.
Okay. If we can get each less than 1 minute. I think I have to stop. One more, okay, one more. Okay. Promise this is the last one.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Mr. Robo, I'm from Johor. But in the past 30 years, I've been in China. I got one very interesting question, is that how China culture and Islamic culture can link up together and create a new generation, bring the benefit for the world, all the people.
Chinese and Islamic culture.
Yes, Chinese culture and Islamic culture can link up together to create a new generation to bring the benefit for all the people in the world.
Thank you very much for that brief and to the point question.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Because I got the experience from 1,000 years ago, the Islamic culture and China culture are linked up together already. So this is very important and can bring benefit for all the world of the people. And I think that our Malaysia can do something from this point, especially our PM. In the past, they have do something of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think the questions are maybe a comment on coming back to Islam and the Islamic principles. And the second one is on the role of Shura. And the last question, can Chinese culture and Islamic culture join hands together to create a new generation that will benefit everybody? So please, give me 1 minute and less.
Okay. Well, the last question is quite a tricky question. I mean, because right now, what are we speaking about? Are we speaking about the culture of the Chinese people or the Chinese state. Because in China we do have a central state which manages the public sphere in a typical way. And surely China is very successful economically, militarily. Right now it is co-sharing the first leading place with the United States. China did not oppress us, did not colonize us. But it is ruled by a one party that basically dominates all the public sphere. And from that side, right now, we need to be aware of the level of freedom which is available in China, the level of justice and so on. It would be very hard to Islamically defend a central power that has everything in its hand, because Islam defends really the power of the people, of the society, and that the society organizes itself freely. And Islam defends differences within societies, whether in belief, whether in races, and so on. So it will be very hard to find common values, at least on this level. But surely we do, as Muslims, have many common values with China, with the Chinese. At least right now it is a successful state. As for the other part in regard to the level of, differences between the practice and values, this is a real challenge, yes, it is a real challenge. But when we get into practice, we are doomed to make mistakes. So we are not different from other people. It's not because we are Muslims that we are agents. So we Muslims, we do make a lot of mistakes. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is allowing us what is called at-tawbah. So a Muslim is obliged, when he makes a mistake, to recognize that he's made a mistake and to reform his actions. This is not enough. That is why we need to have a balance of power that helps the society to reform the mistakes of those who are ruling it. And this brings us to our today's discussions in regard to how the Muslim society is able to make what we might brand as tawbah, social tawbah, that is getting out from the problems and mistakes and akhta to reforming our actions. As for individuals, every individual is a human being, and that is why we have a Sharia. And we need to remember, and we finish with it, that this Sharia, which speaks about people who perpetrate all types of crimes, it was revealed when the Prophet was there, the Sahaba they were there, and these were the highest example for us. Even though Allah has addressed them as people who can make not only mistakes, but who can make crimes. And that is why they needed this Sharia law.
I think your 1 minute is up. Sorry. Okay, just nice.
I think that will explain very eloquently. I just wanted to add that, of course, culturally, there's so many similarities that we can celebrate. And one of the key tenets of the Asian Renaissance, which is the book that Sri Ibrahim wrote back in 1997 before his sacking, really looked at the kind of ascension of the Asian Renaissance, talk about concepts of values like filial piety, Confucianism. I think those are the things that we can definitely exalt in the region and celebrate. But by the same token, in terms of political systems, of course, each country domestically will have to go through its own set of internal challenges. I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all suggestion, for one. And number two, I think it's also important for us to kind of understand along the rights of minorities, of different segments. There will always be room in areas where we ourselves in Malaysia can improve. Yeah, so similarly, other countries, we have to take a more healthy look and I think introspective on such matters. I also think there's many, I think Prof. Osman Bokha was here just now. They've got a lot of programs that they've organized vis-a-vis Islam and Confucianism, and I would definitely be happy to link you up with their ongoing effort. Now, on Aung San Suu Kyi, as one of the people who are very supportive, of course, I myself feel very, very disappointed and angered by certain outbursts that have showcased the deep prejudice and unfair treatment. But this is also applicable to us everywhere. I think we're always in a constant state where we need to improve not just our niyat, but the way we treat others. The whole concept of ta'arafu, it's not just about tolerating a person that is from a different racial and religious background. It's actually making sure you know one another and you kind of build that camaraderie, and that's the challenge that we face in many nations. I don't discount also the challenges faced in a lot of Islamic nations. We're not here to defend them. We are equally worried as the rise in Islamophobia only grows from day to day. But again, that's why we go back to the need to remain steadfast in the values that we come up with, and the need to celebrate again the thinking, the ideals, and the courage of Sheikh Dr. Rashid Ghanouchi, and to extend our deepest gratitude to Dr. Andrew March for also lending your time, your effort, and your support for this particular initiative and launch. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached near the end of our discussion. And before that, please allow me to announce a few matters. The book on democracy, on Muslim democracy, is available at the back to be purchased. And also, we have another book by our chairman, a new release, a book, Imtihan, also available at the back. And I was told that it's going to be on a special discount. So please, if you want to know more about Muslim democracy, it's also there. It's a novel. Yeah, novel. Novel with the novel ideas as well. So please, thank you very much for joining our engaging discussion. And I think our panelists have also been very insightful and very covering all the topics that the audience want to know. And I would like to apologize again. A lot of questions has been thrown up, but we cannot accommodate all due to time limitations. But feel free to engage with our speakers during the Hari Raya open house, inshallah. So with that, I pass the mic to Mr. Sayuti, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And as our discussion, now the token of appreciation, I would like to call upon Dr. Syed Ahmad Nawawi, Chief Executive Officer, IAIS Malaysia, to deliver some souvenirs to our distinguished panelists. Please welcome. First, Mrs. Nurul Izzah Anwar. And next, Dr. Yusra Ghanouchi. Our third panelist, Dr. Ahmed Galur. And also, I would like to call upon the stage His Excellency Al-Haj Murad Ibrahim, Chief Minister, Bangsamoro Transition Authority, to receive some token of appreciation. Please welcome.